Beneath the dazzling skyscrapers and booming oil fields of Texas, a brutal reality festers, one that few dare to expose. Today we peel back the glitter, and uncover the dark heart of a state famous for its riches. Amid the polished downtowns and luxury condos, a silent war is raging. The homeless are being hunted, displaced, erased. You can see the battered tents crushed under bulldozers, smell the desperation lingering under freeway bridges, hear the anguished cries lost in the roar of indifferent traffic. Why, in one of America's wealthiest states, are the most vulnerable treated like invaders, and who stands silently by watching it all unfold? Stay with us. The truth may shatter everything you thought you knew. Number 1, homelessness crisis in Texas. Texas, the Lone Star. State often shines in the spotlight for its booming economy and endless opportunities. But if you dare to look beyond the glossy headlines, a different, harsher truth reveals itself. In the year 2025, more than 27,000 people across Texas are living without a home. That number has risen steadily year after year, like a silent alarm no one seems willing to answer. San Antonio, once known mainly for its Riverwalk and rich history, now carries a heavier burden. It has officially surpassed Houston and Austin to become the city with the second highest homeless population in the entire state. Over 6,000 individuals, from toddlers to the elderly, now navigate life on its streets, in its alleys, and under its bridges. Across Texas, homelessness clusters like storm clouds over the major urban centers. Houston with its sprawling freeways, Dallas with its glittering skyline, Austin, the so-called tech capital of the South, and of course, San Antonio. But the crisis is not limited to these bustling cities anymore. Out in the rural stretches where cattle once outnumbered people, small pockets of homeless camps have begun to appear hidden behind abandoned barns, tucked away near forgotten gas stations. The pattern is unmistakable. As services tighten in cities, desperation leaks outward into the countryside where help is even harder to find. Shelters are scarce. Medical clinics are few and far between. In many rural towns, a single food pantry might serve hundreds of miles. And while the numbers are staggering, the faces behind them are even more haunting. Walk through downtown Austin, and you will find rows of tattered tents lining the sidewalks, bicycles chained to cracked lampposts, and shopping carts filled with the last remnants of a life once lived indoors. In Dallas, you might hear the hum of generators powering makeshift camps beneath overpasses, where the smell of damp earth and exhaust hangs heavy in the air. Even in wealthier neighborhoods, the signs are there. If you look closely enough, a bundle of blankets hidden behind manicured hedges, a lone figure sleeping on a church doorstep. Texas, proud and prosperous on paper, now wrestles daily with a humanitarian crisis that shows no signs of slowing down. The landscape is changing not just on maps, but in the lives of real people who are fast becoming invisible to a society that marches right past them. And this is only the beginning. As we continue, we will dig deeper into why this is happening and who is being left behind. Number 2, controversial policies fueling homelessness. If you think homelessness in Texas is just a matter of bad luck or poor choices, think again. In 2025, new laws are reshaping the landscape, and not necessarily for the better. 2 key bills, House Bill 32 and Senate Bill 38, have drastically changed the rules of the game. These laws make it easier and faster for landlords to evict tenants, cutting the legal process by almost half compared to just 3 years ago. That means families who fall behind on rent could find themselves out on the street within a matter of days, not weeks. But it does not stop there. Major cities like Austin, Dallas, and San Antonio have introduced strict regulations banning the setting up of tents, sleeping outdoors, and even resting in public spaces. What does that look like on the ground? Police officers sweeping through homeless camps at dawn, bulldozers flattening makeshift shelters, and people losing the only bit of stability they had, all without being offered a place to go. The result? A vicious cycle that experts call accelerated homelessness. According to a report by the Texas Policy Lab, the state has seen a 22% increase in unsheltered homelessness since these laws came into effect in early 2024. Camps are torn down faster than ever. But the human beings who lived there are simply pushed deeper into the margins, not given a way out. And here's where it gets even more complicated. Some parts of the community actually support these cleanup operations. You will hear people say, "We have to keep our cities clean and safe," or "those camps bring crime and disease." In fact, recent surveys show that about 35% of residents in downtown Austin approve of stricter homeless removal policies. On the surface, it sounds reasonable. Who doesn't want safer neighborhoods? But dig a little deeper, and you find a painful truth. Cleaning up the streets often just means hiding the problem, not solving it. Meanwhile, human rights organizations are sounding the alarm. Groups like the Texas Homeless Network and the National Coalition for the Homeless have condemned these actions, calling them short-sighted, cruel, and deeply ineffective. They argue that without real investment in affordable housing, mental health care, and addiction services, these crackdowns only worsen the crisis. They turn a humanitarian issue into a public nuisance, and the people suffering are made invisible once again. So the question lingers. Are these policies simply misguided attempts to manage a tough situation, or are they a deliberate effort to sweep away the most vulnerable members of society? One thing is certain: behind every new law and every swept camp is a human story that deserves to be seen, heard, and remembered. Number 3. Deeper causes beyond housing. When we talk about homelessness, it is easy to point fingers at a lack of housing and call it a day. But if we scratch beneath the surface, the story gets a lot more complicated and a lot more heartbreaking. First, let's talk about the housing crisis. Over the past 5 years, rent prices across Texas have exploded by more than 30%, while average incomes have crept up by barely 10%. That gap leaves thousands hanging off a financial cliff with no safety net. In cities like Austin and Dallas, the average rent for a one-bedroom apartment has soared past $1,800 per month, a number laughably out of reach for many working families. Even more troubling, the availability of affordable housing homes priced for people earning below the median income has plummeted by nearly 25% statewide since 2021. And for people living with disabilities or fixed incomes, the options are almost non-existent. But the housing problem is just the tip of the iceberg. Underneath, the economy is squeezing people harder than ever. Jobs that once paid enough to support a family are now unstable, low-wage, or simply gone. As of 2025, the unemployment rate among low-skill workers in Texas has climbed to 6.7%, a sharp rise compared to previous years. Even for those lucky enough to be employed, wages have not kept pace with soaring costs of living. Imagine working full-time and still having to choose between paying rent or buying groceries. For too many Texans, that nightmare is the new normal. And if that were not enough, the social safety nets designed to catch people before they fall are fraying badly. Programs meant to help former inmates re-enter society are chronically underfunded. Without stable jobs or homes, many slip through the cracks and end up back on the streets, or worse, back behind bars. Meanwhile, the mental health system, already stretched thin, is buckling under the pressure. According to the Texas Health Institute, there are fewer than 15 public mental health beds available for every 100,000 residents. Statewide treatment centers for addiction are scarce. Waitlists are long, and even those who seek help often find closed doors instead of open arms. The truth is harsh but unavoidable. Homelessness in Texas is not simply about losing a roof. It is about an entire system failing to protect the people most at risk. Housing shortages, economic instability, broken support services, they do not just happen in isolation. They collide, overlap, and amplify each other, creating a perfect storm that sweeps ordinary people into the streets. Unless we address all these layers, not just build more shelters, but rebuild the entire framework of support, the crisis will only grow deeper, darker, and deadlier. Number 4. Addiction, the silent killer. When we picture homelessness, we often imagine tents, shopping carts, and broken dreams scattered across empty lots. But hidden beneath that harsh reality lurks a darker, quieter enemy: addiction. Today, in the year 2025, somewhere between 27% and 40% of the homeless population in Texas struggles with substance abuse, whether it is alcohol, drugs, or both. That means out of every 100 people sleeping on the streets, at least 27, and sometimes as many as 40, are fighting a battle against addiction alongside their battle for survival. It is a vicious cycle, one that is brutally simple, yet devastatingly effective. Addiction often leads to job loss. Job loss leads to losing a home. And losing a home deepens the addiction, feeding a hopelessness that can feel impossible to escape. It is like being caught in a rip current. The harder you fight, the deeper you get pulled under. But what about getting help? Sadly, the resources that could break this cycle are in dangerously short supply. Across the state of Texas, there are fewer than 100 publicly funded rehabilitation centers available for free, according to the latest report from the Texas Department of Health and Human Services. With tens of thousands in need, the math just does not add up. Wait lists stretch for months. Beds are limited. For many, help is a lottery they cannot afford to wait for. Even worse, programs aimed at harm reduction approaches that focus on making drug use safer rather than punishing users are still rare. Needle exchange programs, supervised safe use sites, and mobile outreach teams exist only in a handful of cities. And without these tools, overdose rates among the homeless have skyrocketed. In fact, overdose-related deaths in the homeless community rose by 26% statewide between 2023 and 2025. And the damage does not stop there. Alcohol-related liver disease, untreated infections, and mental health crises are tearing through the homeless population, creating barriers that make it even harder for individuals to recover, to find housing, or to re-enter the workforce. Recovery, when it does happen, is a long and lonely road, made longer by the absence of consistent medical care, safe spaces, and community support. At the end of the day, addiction among the homeless is not just a personal failure, it is a systemic failure. When we treat addiction as a moral flaw instead of a medical condition, we turn away from people who are drowning, expecting them to save themselves without a life raft. And until we change how we see, treat, and support those caught in addiction's grip, this silent enemy will continue to claim lives in the shadows, unseen, unheard, and unforgiven. Number 5. How homelessness hurts communities. Homelessness is not just a personal tragedy, it is a social earthquake sending shockwaves through every part of a community. And right now, those tremors are growing stronger across Texas. First, let us talk about the strain on public services. Emergency rooms, already overwhelmed by everyday needs, are now seeing a surge of patients with no regular access to health care. According to the Texas Hospital Association, emergency visits by homeless individuals have increased by almost 28% between 2023 and 2025. But hospitals are just the beginning. County jails, too, are flooded with people arrested for petty offenses like trespassing or loitering acts, born more out of desperation than criminal intent, and social service agencies. They are stretched so thin that many have waiting lists, months long, for basic services like food assistance and mental health counseling. The pressure on the system is matched only by the growing tension in neighborhoods themselves. In areas with higher concentrations of homelessness, incidents of petty crime like theft, vandalism, and public disturbances have seen a 15% rise over the past 2 years, according to recent data from the Texas Public Safety Office. Residents who once walked their dogs at sunset or let their kids play in local parks now hesitate, locking their doors a little earlier and looking over their shoulders a little more often. And with fear comes stigma. Instead of understanding the layers of trauma and hardship behind homelessness, many people default to fear, resentment, or outright hostility. Surveys show that 70% of Texans feel less safe around homeless individuals, a dangerous perception that fuels discrimination, harassment, and policies that push people even further to the margins. Beyond the emotional toll, The financial cost is staggering. Maintaining the status quo, paying for emergency room visits, policing jail time and cleanup operations drains public coffers. Experts from the University of Texas estimate that every chronically homeless person costs taxpayers over $35,000 per year in emergency services and indirect costs. Shockingly, providing stable housing and supportive services would cost about 40% less. In other words, it is cheaper to fix the problem than to ignore it. Yet the cycle continues. And as the crisis spreads, the quality of life for everyone, housed or unhoused, begins to erode. Public parks, once vibrant with families and festivals, become empty or neglected. Downtown streets that should hum with life instead feel uneasy and deserted. After dark, communities fracture. Trust breaks down and hope grows a little harder to hold on to. The truth is simple, but sobering: homelessness affects all of us. It is not someone else's problem. It is ours. Number 6. Success stories of hope. In the middle of all the heartbreak and struggle, a few bright lights are cutting through the darkness and showing that change is not just possible, it is already happening. Take Houston, for example. Over the past 12 years, the city has embraced a bold idea called housing first, and the results have been nothing short of remarkable. Instead of forcing people to prove they were ready for a home by jumping through hoops, Houston flipped the script. They made housing the first step, not the last reward. The city built partnerships between nonprofits, government agencies, healthcare providers, and business leaders. A full-court press aimed at one simple goal: get people into stable homes as fast as possible. And it worked. Since 2013, Houston has reduced its homeless population by 64%. That is not a dream. That is real, life-changing progress. Meanwhile, about 165 miles to the northwest, Austin is writing its own success story. The city has invested more than $65 million into innovative solutions, like micro-home villages, tiny durable cabins that give people privacy, safety, and dignity. These mini-communities are more than just a roof over someone's head. They come with access to job training, counseling, healthcare, and a real chance to rebuild a future. And it is working. Early reports show that individuals placed in these micro-homes are over 70% more likely to find stable employment within their first year. But perhaps the most heartwarming example comes from just outside Austin Community First Village. It is not just a shelter, it is a neighborhood built from scratch to house and empower people who have experienced chronic homelessness. Picture a place where tiny homes cluster around community gardens, art studios, outdoor kitchens, and even a drive-in movie theater. Residents are not treated like outsiders or charity cases. They are neighbors, artists, entrepreneurs, and friends. Today, Community First Village is home to over 500 formerly homeless individuals, and it is still growing. These success stories prove a powerful truth: when we invest in people, instead of punishing them, when we offer hope instead of judgment, miracles can happen. It takes vision, it takes collaboration, it takes courage, but most of all, it takes the belief that everyone, no matter how broken their past, deserves a place to belong. If it can happen in Houston and Austin, it can happen anywhere. All we have to do is choose to build bridges instead of walls. Number 7. Voices from the forgotten. It is easy to talk about homelessness in numbers. It is harder but far more important to talk about it in names, faces, and dreams. Marcus, a former construction worker from Houston, he lost his job during the pandemic, and like dominoes falling, lost everything else soon after. For almost 2 years, Marcus lived under a highway overpass, surviving brutal summers and even colder winters. In his own words, "It is not just the hunger that gets you. It is the feeling that you have been erased." His dreams. Simple, a place to call home. A steady job, and most of all, to be treated with respect, not pity, not fear, just basic human dignity. And Marcus's story is not unique. In fact, according to a 2025 survey by the Texas Homeless Network, over 70% of people experiencing homelessness say their biggest wish is not just a house or a paycheck. It is to be seen, to be acknowledged as people with hopes, talents, and lives worth saving. But it is not just the people on the streets who are fighting impossible battles. Talk to any social worker on the front lines, and you will hear stories that would break the hardest heart. Maria, a case manager in San Antonio, says she juggles a caseload of more than 60 clients at a time, double what she managed 5 years ago. There are days when I feel like I am putting out wildfires with a squirt gun. She laughs, though the exhaustion is clear behind her smile. Success stories do happen. Maria proudly recalls a young mother she helped reunite with her kids after securing stable housing. But for every win, there are just as many losses. Clients who relapse, vanish, or simply give up after years of hitting bureaucratic brick walls. The barriers are brutal. Funding for transitional housing programs in Texas has remained stagnant since 2022 despite the growing crisis. Stigma from the public makes landlords wary of renting to formerly homeless tenants even when backed by government vouchers. And policies often tie support to impossible requirements like maintaining sobriety or full-time employment before any help is given a cruel catch. 22 for people struggling just to survive. What becomes clear after listening to the stories from both the housed and the unhoused is that homelessness is not about broken people. It is about a broken system. It is about everyday human beings trying to climb out of quicksand with their bare hands while the world passes by without looking down. Behind every tent, every sleeping bag, and every worn-out backpack is a person who once dreamed big and still dares to dream if only someone would notice. Number 8, how we can make a difference. Understanding the true roots of homelessness means rejecting the easy stereotypes. It means recognizing that most people on the streets are there because housing is unaffordable, jobs are unstable, healthcare is out of reach, and support systems are crumbling. In fact, a 2025 report from the National Alliance to End Homelessness found that 72% of homeless individuals cited economic hardship as their primary cause, not addiction, not mental illness, but pure financial struggle. Once we open our eyes, real action becomes possible. And the good news is, there are concrete steps each of us can take to make a difference. First, we can support the organizations already doing the heavy lifting. Even a small donation, the price of a few coffees, can help fund shelters, meal programs, legal aid, and job training services. Groups like the Texas Homeless Network and Mobile Loaves and Fishes are out there every single day, but they need resources to keep going. Second, we can give our time. Volunteering at a food bank, a temporary shelter, or a mental health outreach program can be life-changing. Not just for the people you help, but for you, too. Human connection has the power to heal wounds no government program ever could. Third, and maybe most importantly, we can raise our voices. Advocacy works, contacting local representatives to demand better housing policies, pushing for mental health reform, supporting zoning changes that allow for affordable housing projects. All these things matter. They are the slow, steady gears that grind real change into motion. Consider this: every dollar spent on housing first programs saves communities an average of $1.80 in emergency services costs, according to a 2025 study by the University of Texas. In other words, compassion is not just morally right, it is economically smart too. At the end of the day, fixing homelessness is not about saving them. It is about saving all of us. Strong communities leave no one behind. Healthy cities make room for everyone. When we lift up the people who have fallen hardest, we all rise a little higher. So the question is not, can we do something? The real question is, will we? As we have seen throughout this journey, homelessness in Texas is not the result of a single failure. It is the outcome of many forces colliding: rising housing costs, economic instability, broken support systems, and a society that too often chooses to look the other way. Every cold policy and every act of indifference only deepens the crisis, turning temporary hardship into a lifelong struggle. But here is the truth: change is possible, and it starts with us. If we do not act today, who will stand up for the most vulnerable tomorrow? Thank you for joining us on this important exploration. If this story moved you, if it opened your eyes or stirred your heart, We invite you to help us spread the message. Please like this video, leave a comment to share your thoughts, and subscribe to NVL Travel Documentary. Together, we can make sure these voices are heard and that no one is left behind.